are talking 400 Bullets, and this one is written and directed by Tom Patton and stars Jean-Paul Lai and Andrew Lee Potts. Now, this is essentially a unofficial remake of Assault on Precinct 13, but with more of a military twist. So what we have is a kind of setup where it takes place in Afghanistan, and there has been a group of British soldiers, kind of special forces types, that have taken control of some missiles, some very kind of high-end guidance ships, and some gold that was kind of like raided when they were doing some sort of deal. And the Taliban attacks them. Now, Andrew Lee Potts' character gets away with the kind of the guidance ships, which essentially the missiles are useless without them. And he ends up going to this kind of out of the way British Gurkha outpost. But it's only manned by 2 Gurkhas because the rest of the kind of the squad is 40 miles away doing something or others. And then this very small kind of force, these Gurkhas and Andrew Lee Potts' character have to defend the base from the Taliban and maybe other forces that will turn up and be a threat as well. So it's essentially a siege movie. It's more or less the kind of the Assault on Precinct 13 template. We do see a lot of these kind of movies roughly copy the kind of the classic storylines. I mean, we've seen, how many times have we seen, like, you know, movies take like the Rear Window, you know, kind of style movie, you know, or the kind of like what's the Hard Target? That was essentially like the most dangerous game. There's all these kind of like these stories that later on there's all these unofficial kind of remakes and stuff, and it's just, this is kind of one for Assault on Precinct 13. Anyway, let's talk about first of all what I think works for us. Having read some reviews prior to watching this, it was quite badly reviewed, but I didn't think it was quite as bad as some of those reviews do make out. I do think there's some good stuff here. For one thing, I think some of the choreography is pretty damn good. Now, our team of protagonists don't have a huge amount of ammo, so there are quite a few scenes that involve hand-to-hand combat and also things like knives. And I've got to say, I thought the action sequences were fairly well handled. Certainly the kind of the hand-to-hand action sequences, of which there are a reasonable amount. And despite the fact that this is obviously a more or less a copy of Assault on Precinct 13, it's still an exciting story. It's still a story which I'm quite happy to watch, and even though it is, you know, it's a very kind of familiar beat, it has a few sort of tweaks here and there, obviously, but nonetheless, I still think it's, you know, a fun and exciting kind of setup for a story. You know, I quite like the fact they're obviously out in the middle of nowhere. You know, it tries to explain why they can't call for help and how kind of remote they are, stuff like that. I actually quite liked our 2 kind of protagonist characters and the kind of the kind of like the buddy cop almost kind of relationship they kind of have with each other, sort of growing respect. This movie's big into kind of honour and sort of self-sacrifice and stuff like that. And, you know, it's quite a fast-paced movie. It's plenty of action sequences here. So I think it's you know, for the most part, there's some good things to say for a obviously lower budget kind of straight to a VOD DVD kind of action movie. That being said, what doesn't work, the budget does show through, and we have seen many of these kind of like quasi remakes done better. I mean, I've recently reviewed the original Assault on Precinct 13 and the remake, and obviously the original is the one that started it. The remake was a lot higher budget, a lot higher profile. This one is struggling with kind of some of the kind of the budgetary constraints here. Things like kind of CGI, you know, bullets and things like this that kind of look a little faked here and there. So I think some of the actual, although I like the hand-to-hand combat, some of the kind of the gunplay action sequences are a little weak, where people just seem to be like standing in the open kind of firing without ever kind of realistically kind of acting like soldiers, kind of like taking cover, things like this, just kind of allowing themselves to be shot here and there. I have to say, I think some of the acting is a little on the weaker side. You know, it's people sort of struggle with some of the kind of I think the emotional resonance that maybe, if we look at the kind of the two actual Assault on Precinct 13 movies had, it's a little lacking in there. Some of the dialogue as well is kind of hokey and a little cheesy and on the nose. I don't think the kind of the lack of the circumstances that lead up to this are quite as kind of believable in some ways than kind of the Assault on Precinct 13 movies, and it seems a little more sort of plausibility is a little more stretched. The movie is also, I mean, I was wondering if this was made by like the Gurkhas, because it's so much is like the Gurkhas are so great, they're so tough, and it's I'm not saying that they aren't, but it kind of goes overboard with kind of telling you how tough and resilient and honourable the Gurkhas are. And like I said, I'm not saying that isn't the case, but it's weirdly kind of just kind of like sung about so much that it almost seems like they're making too much of a point of it. And then, was this funded by the military or something? It kind of seems like that. But it is nice to see a story that involves kind of Gurkhas. And obviously, they're a big part of British military history. In case you were unawares, Gurkhas are essentially soldiers from South Asian, I think, Nepalese descent, who fight in the British Army. But it's kind of still a kind of a fun, if not particularly memorable, action movie. But I did enjoy it. I was entertained. I kind of liked the chemistry between our two soldiers, despite the fact that I think some of the dialogue is airs on the kind of the melodramatic, shall we say. And it's kind of like we have, a couple of decent action sequences. To me, this is pretty much a kind of and somewhat an average action film, but it's certainly not a bad one. I think it is actually watchable. I don't think it's something you'd probably put in your favourite movies collection or anything like that. But I certainly had a good time watching it, and I think it was at least competently made, if not very well made. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.